9 years ago, they erased me. Tonight, I stepped into their spotlight, and they don't even recognize the storm walking among them. The revolving glass doors of the Astoria Grand spun with a low whoosh behind me, sealing me inside the ballroom's opulent embrace. Crystal chandeliers floated like constellations overhead, scattering fractured stars across the marbled floor. Tuxedos gleamed, silk gowns shimmered, and laughter flowed like expensive champagne, brittle and hollow. I adjusted the sleek line of my black gown, the fabric whispering against my skin like an old secret. Every step I took across the ballroom cracked against the polished marble, each click of my heels a muted war drum announcing a battle no one here realized had already begun. For a moment, time bent. A flash. Me at 18, suitcase bruised and heavy in my numb fingers, standing before the Caldwell Estate's grand door. Margot's gaze glinting with disdain sharper than winter's bite. Vincent's eyes dead with polite cruelty. No words of comfort, no promises to come back inside if I just apologized better, begged harder. Only the door, closing with finality. Only the wind, screaming what they refused to say. You're nothing. Now the air smelled of power and pretense, perfumed and polished, but still stinking of the same rot they had tried to drown me under. I was not here by chance. Every breath, every calculated glance, every precisely measured heartbeat had been sculpted for this moment. A ripple stirred through the guests like a disturbed hive. Faces turned, eyebrows arched. Whispers flickered through the crowd, tasting my presence, sensing the anomaly. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, all chiseled by privilege and self-congratulation. And then, them. Margot Caldwell stood near the stage, clad in a silver gown that screamed aristocracy, her mouth frozen halfway through a forced laugh. Vincent leaned in toward a group of investors, nodding amiably. But his eyes locked onto me across the room, and in that split second, the easy warmth on his face fractured. A vein in his temple twitched. For one delicious heartbeat, they were human. Then the mask slammed back into place. Margot turned away, her spine rod straight. Vincent chuckled too loudly at nothing. Celeste, radiant in red, took a leisurely sip of champagne before noticing me. Her smirk bloomed slowly, a rose watered with poison. "Wrong door, darling," she called out, voice sugary sweet with an undercurrent of venom. Laughter, thin, eager, scattered around us like thrown confetti. The guests, sensing blood, edged closer, hunting for scandal like wolves. I smiled, slow and deliberate, letting the tension stretch like a taut violin string ready to snap. Without a word, I slipped a sleek black VIP card from my clutch, holding it between two fingers. The Caldwell Corporation's insignia gleamed under the crystal lights, sharp as a blade. A hush trickled over the nearest circles. Those who had been poised to jeer blinked instead, thrown off balance. Celeste's smirk faltered by a fraction, a twitch in the corner of her perfect mouth. I advanced toward them, each step measured, savoring the way their composure strained. Margot's knuckles whitened around her champagne flute. Vincent's laugh died half-formed in his throat. Celeste recovered fastest, tossing her hair with a brittle laugh as she turned back to her fiancé. But I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be a ghost, a bad memory they had buried with enough money and contempt to forget. Instead, I had RSVP'd myself to their grand parade. The ballroom air thinned around us. Conversations dipped to murmurs, glances darted like nervous minnows. I moved through it all like a tide, unstoppable, inevitable. Beneath the polish, beneath the champagne and silk, the cracks were yawning wider. Margot stepped toward me, her mouth shaping the beginnings of a reprimand. Perhaps a threat? Perhaps a demand for me to leave and save them embarrassment. I tilted my head slightly, cutting her off before a sound could escape. "Funny," I said, my voice carrying with scalpel precision through the room. "I thought I'd be the guest of honor." Silence slammed down like a gavel. The chandelier light seemed to sharpen, slicing across faces frozen in varying shades of shock, amusement, disbelief. Somewhere in the distance, a waiter stumbled, glasses crashing to the floor, but no one even flinched. Every eye in the ballroom was tethered to me. Celeste gaped at me, momentarily robbed of her customary flair for cutting retorts. Margot's nostrils flared. Vincent's smile shriveled like plastic over flame. The foundation of their perfect world trembled. A hairline fracture, invisible to most, but pulsing bright and obvious to me. I could feel it. The shift in air pressure, the instinctual animal awareness that something was coming, something unstoppable. The storm had been building for nearly a decade, gathering weight with every sleepless night, every whispered doubt, every petty cruelty they had thought I'd swallow quietly. It had all crystallized into this single point of impact. And they didn't even see it coming. From behind me, I felt the brush of steady warmth. A hand, firm, familiar, rested lightly on the small of my back. A silent claim. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Adrian Hunt quietly appeared behind, placing his hand on Sienna's back, his eyes like a smoldering fire. Perfection is brittle when built on lies. All it takes is one gentle tap. The lounge buzzed with the thin, strained energy of too much champagne and not enough sincerity. The laughter, which had once risen like a bright tide, now splintered into uneven waves, hushed too quickly when I passed. Shadows pooled in the corners of the room, soft and treacherous under the gold sconces. A silver tray floated by, borne by a too-young waiter with too tired eyes. I plucked a flute of something sparkling and meaningless, swirling it between my fingers, studying the currents it stirred. Across the room, Celeste glowed under the adoration of a small cluster of admirers, her laughter brittle, high-pitched, just a shade too sharp. Vincent hovered near a window, face taut behind a brittle smile. Margot held court in the center, her voice carrying a little too loudly as she recounted some sanitized family legend. I sipped the champagne, sweet, acidic, and let the memory unspool. The last dinner I had shared with them. A sprawling table heavy with linen and sterling silver, the air thick with disapproval masquerading as civility. Margot's pointed silence. Vincent's passive-aggressive toasts to real success. And Celeste, sitting opposite me, her smirk carved deep, eyes gleaming with smug triumph, as if she already knew the door would close on me forever. I set the glass down with a soft click. Tonight, the game was mine to play. I drifted toward Celeste's orbit, weaving effortlessly through clusters of suits and sequins. The moment she noticed me, she stiffened, though she masked it with a honeyed smile. "Celeste?" I purred, voice carrying just enough to snag the attention of her audience. "You look radiant. You must have graduated at the top of your class." The words dripped with false admiration, perfectly balanced between flattery and a blade hidden in velvet. Celeste preened, tilting her head so the chandelier light caught every gleaming highlight. "Well," she demurred, "you know, I worked very hard." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the circle around her. People leaned in, sensing something juicy in the undercurrent. Before she could steer the conversation elsewhere, Mr. Langston, a titan in tailored navy, stepped closer, his smile affable but sharp. "Which university was it again?" he asked casually, swirling his bourbon. A beat of silence too long. Celeste's lashes fluttered. "Columbia," she said, the word brittle on her tongue. I tilted my head, feigning polite curiosity. "Really? I thought you mentioned Brown at the Christmas party." Another ripple, sharper now. Mr. Langston's smile thinned, the way a shark's fin cuts through still water. Celeste laughed. Too high, too brittle. "Oh, well," I transferred. "You know how it is," she stammered. I nodded graciously, like a queen indulging a jester. Across the room, Adrian caught my eye. From the shadows of a column, he lifted his phone briefly. The screen lit up. Phase 1 complete. The pieces were sliding into place. The first cracks spidered through the Caldwell facade. hairline fractures invisible to the untrained eye, but deadly in their inevitability. The air shifted, just subtly, as whispers began to thread themselves between conversations. Names, schools, degrees. Questions were seedling in fertile, suspicious soil. Near the grand piano, a figure loitered, sipping from a crystal glass without drinking. His suit was nondescript, his face forgettable. But his eyes, sharp, calculating, were anything but casual. He wasn't part of the Caldwell circle. He wasn't a guest at all. He was watching me. I let the game unfold without acknowledging him. Celeste, rattled now, was clinging harder to her laughing act, gripping her champagne flute as if it were a lifeline. Margot's gaze flickered toward us from across the lounge, mouth tightening. Vincent edged closer, the veneer of his social grace beginning to fray at the edges. I allowed myself a sip of champagne, savoring the slight bite of bubbles against my tongue. This wasn't enough yet. A hairline crack was a beginning, but I needed a collapse. Movement from the corner of my eye. The figure by the piano detached himself from the shadows and crossed the floor toward me. He moved with the easy assurance of someone who knew how to avoid being noticed, but had chosen now to be seen. As he drew near, I caught a glimpse of a worn press badge clipped inside his jacket, half concealed. Anonymous, my mind supplied instantly, without emotion. The Fourth Estate had a nose for blood, and mine was the scent they had caught. He approached with a casual tilt of his head, as if asking to share a secret joke. "If you have more," he said, voice low, smooth as river stones. "I can make sure the world hears it." I considered him for a moment, the murmuring lounge folding itself around us like a living organism, full of shifting eyes and sharpened ears. This was faster than I had expected, but not unwelcome. I let a slow smile curl across my lips, deliberate, enigmatic, calculated to slice deep without drawing visible blood. Sienna looks at the reporter, smiles mysteriously. "Oh, you'll want to stay close tonight." The first crack was a whisper. The second will be a scream. The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 fractured lights, but the shimmer was losing its luster. Laughter strained at the edges, thinned by rumors circulating like smoke through a dry forest. Faces smiled tighter. Conversations stumbled over sudden gaps. The ground beneath the Caldwell dynasty trembled softly, imperceptibly to those drunk on power. But I could feel every shudder. The main stage stood bathed in a halo of spotlight, waiting. Rows of gold chairs faced the platform, occupied by a who's who of New York's business elite. At the back of the room, by the champagne towers, the anonymous journalist lingered, his camera tucked casually into his jacket, a hawk in a sea of peacocks. The master of ceremonies, a polished man with gleaming teeth and too much enthusiasm, adjusted his microphone with a flourish. His voice rang out over the expectant crowd, warm, rehearsed, oblivious to the gathering storm. "And now," he declared, "the moment we've all been waiting for, to honor an outstanding contributor to Caldwell Corporation's incredible legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Celeste Caldwell to the stage." A surge of applause broke out, dutiful, automatic. Flashbulbs winked. Celeste rose from her seat with the elegance of a queen, her crimson gown slicing through the crowd. She was already smiling, already reaching for the trophy in her mind. Margot dabbed the corner of her eye theatrically. Vincent clapped with controlled pride. I moved before they could bask. A hush followed the echo of my heels as I stepped into the aisle, a thin folder tucked under my arm. For a second, the room didn't react, as if refusing to believe what it was seeing. Then the tension snapped taut. I ascended the steps to the stage, the soft fabric of my gown pooling behind me like the train of a conquering general. Celeste faltered halfway across the stage, her perfect smile flickering, rebooting, and then freezing entirely. I reached the microphone before the MC could intercept, my fingers brushing lightly against his wrist as if to thank him for his service, and dismiss him. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, voice poised and cutting through the ballroom like a diamond scalpel. "Before we celebrate, I thought it might be enlightening to share a few truths. I opened the folder. Silence crushed the room under its weight. I pulled out the first page, a set of transcripts bearing Celeste's name. Falsified, the seals forged, the grades inflated. Then came the letter from one university, politely declining her enrollment after irregularities were discovered, and the copies of correspondence between Margot's private fixer and two deans, generously padded with donations in exchange for favorable records. Each page floated down to the floor as I let it slip from my fingers, a snowfall of betrayal landing at Celeste's high-heeled feet. Across the ballroom, the journalist raised his camera, the red recording light blinking to life. Margot surged from her chair, her face a mask of frozen outrage. "This is a private matter," she cried, her voice cracking against the ballroom's marble walls. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. Was it private when you plastered her fabricated achievements across every billboard? Was it private when you leveraged those lies to secure investment deals? The crowd shifted uneasily, a ripple of collective realization sliding through them. Some gasped audibly. Others simply stared, eyes wide, as if seeing the Caldwells clearly for the first time. Celeste stood paralyzed, the trophies of her life crumbling into ash around her. Mr. Langston, still near the front, crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes, an investor smelling rot. Beside him, whispers turned into rivers, then into rapids. Phone screens flickered as people began recording, texting, posting. Adrian, from his place at the edge of the room, simply nodded once, his expression unreadable but proud. The MC stood helpless, sweat beating at his temple. I stepped aside, granting the stage fully to Celeste, granting her the center she had always craved, but this time under a spotlight she couldn't control. Celeste opened her mouth once, twice, no sound emerging. And then she cracked. Tears spilled down her perfectly made-up face, black rivers staining crimson silk. A raw, shuddering sob tore from her chest, too loud, too ugly to be hidden. She crumpled where she stood, sinking to the floor amid the confetti of her own deceit. Hundreds of guests, the city's elite, watched in stunned silence. The journalist zoomed in, immortalizing the collapse in real time. Behind me, Margot's face contorted in fury and horror. Vincent's shoulders sagged as the last of his composure slipped free. The empire they had built on appearances, manipulation, and whispered deals was hemorrhaging before the world's eyes. I leaned into the microphone, allowing the cold satisfaction to glide into my voice, every syllable a polished dagger. And that was just the beginning. It was never about revenge. It was about revealing the rot they'd painted gold. The ballroom had become a living thing, thrumming with anticipation, vibrating with the unsaid. The laughter was gone now, buried under the growing weight of scandal and betrayal. Eyes darted. Whispers sharpened into barbed wires, slicing through the thin fabric of decorum. The Caldwell name, once a shining shield, was now a flaring beacon attracting vultures. I stood near the center of it all, the cold hum of adrenaline slick against my skin. Every breath felt like a countdown. Every beat of my heart a drum announcing the fall of an empire. For a moment, the noise of the room faded and another memory stole into focus. Me, huddled on a sticky vinyl bench in the back corner of a diner that smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. A crumpled jacket around my shoulders, a bruised suitcase at my feet, and in my hands, the thin, stolen slip of paper bearing my social security number. My one tether to a future they thought they'd stripped away. That fragile piece of identity had been my anchor, and their eventual noose. Tonight, it would tighten. I stepped forward, letting my heels strike the marble with deliberate, resonant clicks. Every head turned. I caught the MC's nervous glance as I approached, his fingers twitching on the microphone stand. "Before we close this evening," I said, voice smooth, carrying across the tense air, "I have a small gift for everyone." I tilted my head toward the technician manning the AV desk near the side wall. He hesitated, glanced toward Margot. But Margot was frozen, her spine ramrod straight, her lips bloodless. "Go ahead," I said. The technician swallowed, then pressed a button. The ballroom's ornate ceiling dimmed, and a giant screen descended with a mechanical hiss. A heartbeat later, it flickered to life. The first image, an internal Caldwell Group email, Margot's name emblazoned at the top, instructing an underling to move unallocated funds into a private offshore account under a shell corporation named Orion Strategies LLC. Murmurs exploded through the crowd. Another file appeared. A string of wire transfers, tens of thousands, then hundreds, moving from Caldwell subsidiaries into personal trusts in the Cayman Islands. Then a spreadsheet, fake invoices, phantom consulting fees, signatures blurred, amounts inflated. Faces turned toward Margot and Vincent, horror blooming. I walked to the edge of the stage, the screen's glow haloing me in stark white. "But that's just the prelude," I said, my voice slicing through the growing chaos. The next image froze the room cold. A loan agreement for $2 million tied to Orion Strategies. Approved using my stolen Social Security number. My forged signature scrawled at the bottom. Gasps tore through the guests like a riptide. Chairs scraped against marble. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It shattered like a gunshot. Margot's hand fluttered to her throat, a queen realizing her throne had been sought out from under her. Vincent lurched forward, sputtering, but no words formed. From the side of the room, Adrian stepped into the light, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. "For those curious," he said, his voice carrying over the din, calm and brutal. "We've also uncovered additional offshore holdings connected to the Caldwell Group, all routed through shell entities in Belize, Panama, and Singapore." The journalist at the back was broadcasting live now, his lens sweeping the room, capturing every ounce of implosion. Margot's mask cracked visibly. She lunged toward the AV station, arms outstretched, desperation painting her features grotesque. "No!" she screamed, voice raw with terror. "Shut it off! Shut it off!" But it was too late. The broadcast was streaming across networks, social media, news outlets. Caldwell's sins were unspooling in real time, beyond the grasp of silencing or bribery. A commotion surged by the entrance. Men in dark suits, grim-faced, methodical, pushed into the room, flashing badges. IRS. The lead agent, a woman with clipped tones and sharper eyes, stepped forward. "This event is now under federal investigation," she announced. "No one is to leave the premises. Preserve all documentation and digital devices. Effective immediately." Panic rippled outward. Guests scrambled to power down phones, hide conversations, distance themselves from the sinking ship. Vincent staggered back, bumping into a chair, his face pale and sweating. Margot clutched at his arm, but he shook her off, his mask of nobility fracturing into something raw, pathetic. On the giant screen behind me, a final image bloomed. Margot's authorization for the shell company's creation, countersigned by Vincent, time-stamped the year they had thrown me into the street. It had never been about negligence or oversight. It had been deliberate, ruthless, calculated. I watched them unravel, savoring the precise symmetry of it all. Margot screamed in despair, rushing to tear up the documents on the screen. But it's too late. Everything has been live-streamed globally. They thought I would fade into dust. I became the fire that turned their empire to ash. Morning light slashed across the steel and glass face of the Caldwell Corporation headquarters, cold and merciless. It should have been another day of power lunches, closed-door deals, the hum of a dynasty reinforcing itself. Instead, the building sat like a tombstone, looming over a crowd of news vans, reporters, and spectators smelling blood in the water. I stood across the street, coffee cooling in my hand, watching. In the back of my mind, memories curled like smoke. Nights spent wiping down greasy diner counters, calluses blooming along my palms. Early mornings scrubbing floors slick with old beer and broken dreams. The quiet mantra I had chanted into the void again and again. Just one chance. One crack, one reversal. Now the cracks had split wide open, swallowing everything they had built on lies. The front doors shuddered open. Margot stumbled through first, flanked by tight-faced attorneys. Her usual armor, sleek designer suits, perfectly calculated sneers, had crumbled. Today she wore a shapeless coat and a dazed expression, her mouth opening and closing without sound as microphones thrust toward her. Behind her came Vincent, his tie crooked, his hair mussed, face glistening under the ruthless camera lights. Celeste followed, makeup smudged, eyes red-rimmed. A cacophony of shouted questions assaulted them. "Mrs. Caldwell, how do you respond to the IRS investigation?" "Mr. Caldwell, can you confirm the offshore accounts?" "Celeste, did you fake your degree?" Margot pressed forward blindly. Vincent threw up a hand to shield his face, but Celeste stumbled. A gasp rippled through the crowd. She turned to the cameras, blinking, chest heaving, then broke. "I didn't mean to," she sobbed, words spilling out faster than she could control. I just wanted to make them proud." The microphones swarmed closer, smelling fresh scandal. "I never finished college," she cried, collapsing to the concrete steps, hands clawing at her designer dress. I lied about everything." Somewhere inside the building, Caldwell Corporation's stock ticked downward, a bleeding wound on every financial screen in the city. I sipped my coffee, savoring the slow, inevitable ruin. Adrian appeared beside me, his expression unreadable. He passed me a manila envelope without a word. Inside, a report from one of the city's biggest banks. All Caldwell assets, domestic and offshore, officially frozen. A neat little bow tying off months of careful investigation. "And the sponsors?" I asked quietly, never taking my eyes off the spectacle. "Pulling out faster than rats from a sinking ship," Adrian said. Already, news tickers scrolled across the bottom of television screens. Caldwell Corporation under federal investigation. Sponsorships terminated. Stock suspended. The video from the gala had detonated across social media overnight, racking up millions of views. Clips of Celeste's meltdown and Margot's shriek were meme fodder before sunrise. Public opinion swung from scandalized outrage to gleeful dismantling. And in the center of it all, like the eye of a storm, my name hovered. Whispers spread. Who is Sienna Caldwell? How did the forgotten daughter bring them down? An email pinged into my inbox. An anonymous offer. A rival conglomerate once muscled out by the Caldwells, now keen to meet. Discreetly. Privately. They wanted to talk. Opportunities. The irony tasted sweeter than champagne. Adrian leaned closer, voice pitched low. "You broke them," he said, not in awe, but with a quiet certainty that anchored me. I hadn't needed rage. I hadn't needed forgiveness. I had needed precision and patience. And now the empire that had thrown me into the cold was burning to ashes around its architects. Across the street, a network crew shoved a microphone into Vincent's face. Sweat gleamed along his hairline. His pupils dilated, wild. "You want the truth?" He barked, voice cracking. "She's not even one of us." The crowd gasped, a sharp intake of breath at the ugly slip. The cameras whirred closer. He had meant to discredit me, but the words hung there, a grotesque confirmation of everything I had long suspected. I wasn't their daughter. I was a tool, a name to be used, a liability to be discarded. I let the sting wash over me, then recede like a dying wave. Slowly, I crossed the street. The crowd parted around me, sensing something inevitable. I moved to stand squarely in front of Vincent, the cameras trained on both of us, capturing every flicker of movement, every breath. I looked straight into the main camera, ignoring him entirely. I let a cold, razor-thin smile slice across my lips. "You're right. I'm better." I didn't reclaim my past. I forged my future. The diner's windows fogged slightly against the crisp bite of early winter, softening the world outside into smudges of gray and gold. Inside, The heater rattled weakly, barely cutting through the chill. The booths were cracked with age, the coffee bitter and bottomless, and the floor tiles scuffed by decades of weary shoes. And yet, it felt like the most sacred place I'd ever sat. I nursed a cup of black coffee, letting the steam curl around my fingers as the newsprint on the table blurred and reformed under my gaze. Margot and Vincent Caldwell formally charged in federal court. Below the headline, a grainy photo captured them leaving a courthouse, heads bowed, faces hollow. Margot's mouth was twisted in mid-protest. Vincent's hands were cuffed, hidden beneath the sleeves of an expensive, rumpled coat. Another article, smaller, noted Celeste's sudden disappearance from public life. No one could say where she had gone. No more interviews, no more galas. Just silence. I folded the paper gently, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow, only a clean, profound stillness. The first day they fired me, or rather, cast me out under the guise of disappointment and disdain. I had sat alone on a splintered bench in a bus station, shivering, staring at a cold sandwich someone had thrown away, and whispered to the emptiness around me, "One day they'll know who I am." It wasn't a prayer. It was a vow. And now, they knew. Adrian slid into the booth across from me, his hair still damp from the icy drizzle outside. He set 2 tickets on the table between us, the edges curling slightly with moisture. "Rome," he said simply. "Venice, Florence, take your pick." I stared at the tickets for a long moment, feeling the possibilities unfurl like wings behind my ribs. He leaned back, studying me with that quiet, steady gaze of his. "You don't have to stay here," he said. "You don't have to carry it anymore." Outside the window, a winter crow launched itself into the slate-gray sky, its wings slicing the morning mist like a blade. For years, I had thought revenge would be the destination, a final, burning exclamation point to the chapters they had tried to erase. But sitting here now, I understood. It had never been about them. It had always been about me. About carving my name into stone with my own hands, not scratching it bitterly into theirs. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, the official registration of my new company. Phoenix Consulting. It read in crisp black ink, the stylized logo of a bird rising in flames etched beneath it. Born from ruin, forged in fire. I smiled, a real smile this time, small and sharp and free. Adrian tapped the tickets lightly, nudging them closer. "Time to fly, Sienna." I slipped the envelope back into my pocket, tucking the tickets beside it. My fingertips brushed the two together, the old and the new, the ashes and the spark. Rising from my seat, I pushed the door open. The bell above jingled weakly. Outside, the wind whipped my coat around my knees. The city stretched before me, vast and unpromised, its streets slick with the last shivers of rain. I stepped into the morning. The sunlight broke through a gap in the clouds, falling across my face in a golden wash. She stands up, the sunlight shining on her calm face, and walks out of the café. Free, no longer afraid. The ruins of the Caldwell Empire were not built in a day, and neither was the woman who dismantled it. Justice, sharpened by years of silence and resolve, had found its mark at last. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. Somewhere beyond the smoke, a phoenix rises, and this time it carries its own name.